Hey, everybody. Welcome to the 11th podcast for the United Pool Association podcast. I'm actually flying solo, Joe Mishik here. Steve wasn't able to join us today, but I have Rich DeMoss with us with LaMotte. He's the Global Pool Business Director with LaMotte, and he's here to talk to us today a little bit about their products, but more exclusively about the Waterlink Spintouch. But before we get into that, I just want to introduce Rich, and I'm just happy to have him on. We've had a lot of people, great guests on early for our podcast, as young as it is, but really happy to have Rich on and talk about this. It's getting a lot of play on social media and just kind of the market as a whole. And glad to have him on. Thanks, Rich.
Yeah, good morning, Joe. Glad to be here. Very exciting time for LaMotte with the Spintouch. For myself, I've been working with LaMotte about 20 years now. The company itself has been in business for 100 years, so our anniversary this year. I know, it's hard to believe when it comes to a manufacturer to be in business that long. We have third generation LaMotte running the company, so we had David LaMotte as president, and Richard as vice president.
Okay.
And I guess what I do is basically I'm in charge of strictly our pool business globally, which includes Australia, Europe, North America, South Africa. So it's keeps me busy.
So do you travel to all those countries?
I have, except for I haven't been to South Africa yet.
Okay.
I've been to Europe a couple times. Usually I go there for their international show, which they have in Lyon, France, or Barcelona. And great cities if you ever get a chance to go over there. And then Australia, I've been there a few times. It's a very long flight, not something I enjoy, but once you're there, it's a great country. And we've been trying to do a lot more internationally now, especially with the Spintouch and other products that we offer.
Yeah, you can definitely outreach to more people with that device.
Right. And it's interesting because depending on the country, like for example, in Australia, a lot of the service professionals are using electronic type testing, photometric meters like the Spintouch, and they do a lot of testing, kind of like we do in the U.S. Whereas over in Europe, the testing is not done as often. But they still want to use some type of electronic photometric meter also. And it's amazing how different parts of the world are slightly different what they're worried about testing for. So.
Sure. Interesting. I didn't know LaMotte was that old either. That's pretty cool.
Yes.
So is David and Rich, are they, so you said they're third generation, so it was probably their grandfather, I would imagine?
Correct, yes.
Started it?
Yeah, he started in 1919.
Wow, exactly 100 years. That's amazing. Exactly. Congratulations. Exactly. Not a lot of companies can say that today. So.
I know there's not many because especially manufacturing side, it's incredible that we make like 95% of our products here in the U.S.
Wow. So. Yeah, I know. I was just reading. Trying to remember what it was called. It was more of a synopsis of Wilfrid Langelier's history and kind of the upbringing of water, water treatment plants and stuff. And that was a really interesting read. But yeah, to have LaMotte around that long, it really says a lot about your company and how far you guys have come.
Right.
But so you said you've been with them 20 years. That's pretty awesome. Were you doing anything before that in the swimming pool industry?
Actually, I wasn't. I basically was owning a retail business at the time and sold that business.
Gotcha.
And, have a marketing sales background. So luckily I got a job with LaMotte there, position opening for pool and spa department. So
awesome.
Yeah.
I've actually been in the industry about as long as you have. I'm going to be 39 this year. I started when I was about 18 in the just right out of high school.
Sure.
In fact, the guy that I started with, he just recently passed away. So
sorry to hear
kind
that.
of a nod to him. But Yeah, it's been a great career, and I've seen a lot of changes, kind of like with LaMotte, I'm sure. But let's just get right into this. I'm sure our guests are dying to hear about, you talk about this, and let everybody know I actually have one, so I can be kind of a little bit of an assistance. And I've had mine, I think, since February. Um, Great device. I'm pretty happy with it. I've never seen anything like it on the market. Um, Tell our listeners what's one of the things that really led LaMotte to push to do something like this. Was it a field device? Was it the 10 parameters that you can test for? What was kind of that driving factor that led to the Spintouch?
Well, I mean, for years, everybody's asked for kind of like the black box where you just add water to it,
Yeah,
and it tests everything. And for years, it was very hard because normally you were using like a liquid type reagent or titration, or you were using a test strip, or we used to have a lab system called our Waterlink Express system, which was a powder type reagent system. A lot of retailers were using it. So from shows and feedback from customers, they were looking for something fast, easy, because everybody's into making sure it's quick and easy so they can get customers. At the time, we were more into the retail side. So getting customers through the store quickly with precise results. And
right.
so what happened is that we spent probably about 7 years in development on the Spintouch back in, I guess it was the 2000s, where at one point we almost gave up on it because it is so hard to manufacture the reagents that go into the spin disc. And luckily, we had some breakthrough back in late 2000 where we were able to move forward with the lab system. And so when we launched the original lab, it was called the Spin Lab, which was for retailers back in 2012.
Gotcha.
And we probably sold, I think, around 12,000 of those labs worldwide. And during that time, we started getting feedback from retailers who also have a service department who wanted to take the meter out in the field. So we actually tried to launch a mobile spin lab using the same spin lab in the store, but having a battery pack hooked up to it and Bluetooth and a meter. And it worked okay, but we saw the need where we needed to make a unit where it's really designed for the Service Pro, the take in the field, the battery inside the meter, and so forth.
Yeah.
And
that is a big deal because, there's a lot of challenges to that. And I know you did an interview with David Van Brunt.
Right.
For those that listen to his podcast, it's a great interview, by the way. It was done about 14 or 15 months ago, so it's a while back. But you guys talked about that, and the case is very important, keeping it secure and all the little things that go along with it. So it's not just taking a device and bringing it out into the field, and usually they're poolside, because most guys are bringing it right there to test the water. So yeah, it's very important to have that mobility with the device.
Right. Yeah, the mobility, like you touch upon, is probably the most important thing with the mobile spin, because we took we placed a lithium battery inside the meter, and we also made it Bluetooth, and also added the display to it. So, if somebody wanted to just run tests and get results on the meter, they can do that. If they want to use the Bluetooth portion, we have a water analysis program that's web-based, where you download a free app and you can run it, get results into it, and have your recommendations and dosage amounts. So trying to make it user-friendly, but also knowing that how it's being used in the field. Like you mentioned, the carrying case is very important. It's a waterproof carrying case, and easy to carry around for the user.
Yeah, the biggest thing too is that that mobile app, which I got to admit I haven't actually jumped on, because when I take the data, I have a program that I already put it into. So, but one of the interesting things that I heard you and David speaking of, and not to talk about that podcast, but that was very interesting because you can keep kind of the log of the information through your app, because it just pushes the information there. So you actually have kind of a log in case something were to happen with you and the customer. That information's right there, and there's no disputing that, if something were to happen, which is one of those nice tools that, you offer.
Right. Yes. And you're right about that. The data log is very important, easy to use. Basically, when you run a test on the meter, a Bluetooth button pops up. You just press it, and then results will go into your phone or your iPad. And then from there, it will give you what you need to do next, like what chemicals to add, how to add the chemicals. And when you're finished, you're able to send, we call an e-door hanger to the customer if you want to, but it saves everything. So if you ever have to go back to it, say next week or a month later, or when you get back in the office, you can do that. So yeah, it makes it really convenient. The big thing, and definitely the last couple of years, you've been seeing a lot more pool professionals trying to have a program that can do everything from scheduling, routing, keeping inventory, all those different things. And it's all important in running a business. If you have your one-person business or 200 people working for you.
Sure, that is definitely a big deal, and those are getting a lot of play right now. We interviewed Ron Hash with Skimmer, but yeah, I didn't even realize your app was that all inclusive, which is pretty awesome. So
right.
Go check it out. Check out the app. That's one of those things that's very useful. Orenda has their LSI app, which is also very important.
Yes, very good app.
We'll get to that in a second, because that's one of the things that's really big about the Spintouch is what it's been able to offer for the LSI. But one quick thing that you touched on was the advancement, because one of the things a lot of guys say is, what is the benefit to me having this in the field for, it's not a cheap unit. Somewhere between $600, $800 is how much you're going to pay for it. But explain to our listeners and anybody viewing this on YouTube, what is the benefit that you feel like that offers the customer the best, advantage? Because I have a little bit of mine, but I like to hear it from you, Rich, as far as why it's probably better than any other tester out there for the money, I guess.
Right. Yes. Well, many different things. First off, just so you know, we had the meter sent to NSF for evaluation, which is very important, especially if you're working in the commercial field. So the meter was approved as NSF level 1 for water testing, which is the highest you can receive for a lab system. And they put it through various types of evaluation with accuracy, precision, consistency. And so, using a lab, there's many different features that are important, but I think the top, let's say 5 or 6, is to be able to run a test and get precise results every time. So being consistent. A lot of times when you're using, let's say, a visual type testing, visually you're looking at it and you see one color, I see a different color. And there's a high percentage of men that are colorblind. So when they try to match up certain colors, they just get, incorrect results.
Wow.
And it's nothing they're doing wrong. It's just that visually they're seeing different things. And also lighting too, with the older style type testing, certain lights, indoor lights can affect your readings too, for like alkalinity and so forth. So consistency, precision, ease of use. As you know, if you've used titrations type testing, you have to add so many drops of one reagent, and then so many drops of another reagent and another reagent. And often with users, maybe they don't hold the bottle correctly, or the liquid reagent has expired, but they don't realize it's expired.
Yeah.
It's not working properly. So with the spin disc that's used in the meter, when you go to fill it, as you know, use a syringe full of water and basically fill it past the line that's on the disc. As long as you do that, you'll get excellent results. And so once those results are tested, the meter does the reading for you and it saves the results. And so it makes it much easier for the user as versus what's being used elsewhere in the marketplace.
How hard, For our listeners that aren't aware, the disc is about a couple inches in diameter,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe actually a little bit bigger than that. But you fill it. You kind of feel like you're doing like DNA analysis because you're putting a syringe in this little tiny hole and filling up this inner ring that looks like Iron
CSI.
Man's like arc reactor or something.
Right.
But it was kind of cool to hear you talk about how far you guys have come with the technology, because you look at that thing and you're like, I'm going to get all these readings out of all these little tiny pockets on the outside of the disc.
Right.
And they're all going to be accurate, the consistency and all of that. I've tried to keep mine at the recommended, not going over 80 degrees, but in my truck, that's hard. So I'm looking, and we're not quite super hot yet here in Phoenix or in other parts of the Sun Belt part of the country, but I'm looking at putting mine into a cooler, at least my discs that come sealed, just so that I don't get them too hot. But I just want to talk to the listener about the fact that these discs are pretty sensitive, I think, and having all these different reagents. I heard you mention it, that they're kind of they're like a stain test, right? So the water fills up those pockets, and then there's little tiny steel like BBs in there that bounce around and mix up the water with the reagent. Really happy to hear that you said that your NSF1. That's great, because the consistency has always been kind of on my question of my mind, is how consistent is the results? That's what I think a lot of guys maybe are thinking too. So
yeah, I mean, with the like you mentioned about the disc, the reagents, or how it's manufactured, is that you have these let's say syringes or needles come down and fill each well with a particular reagent. So it's actually a liquid reagent that then goes through an oven and then dries it. So it becomes like a stain test in a way. So when you add water to the disc and it starts spinning, inside the meter itself is a magnet in the top. So there's little BBs that you mentioned. As it's going around, the magnet and the BBs is pulling those BBs up and basically agitating the water with the reagent, so it mixes. Kind of like if you had a liquid reagent in a test tube and you kind of mix it with your hand, back and forth. It's kind of doing something similar, where it's basically pumping the water and reagent together and mix it. And then when you're finished, you have that nice color reaction in the disc, like you mentioned, where you can measure 10 different tests in 60 seconds.
Yeah.
And then the precision or the accuracy with any type of testing, there's always a plus or minus with the accuracy. And it varies on the test factor. For example, like salt in the disc, you have a plus or minus like 200 to 300 parts per million, which is not, I think that's great. So when you run a test, you should be in that plus or minus factor for that particular test factor.
Okay.
And then, I ran a disc earlier, and I'm not sure if the viewers have seen one or not. It's probably hard to see in this right now, but
there you go. Yeah, that looks pretty good.
Yeah, clear plastic, small size, has a D hub to it. So when you place it onto the meter, it's always a certain way every time. And when you're filling, there's one hole that's in there that's there at that same location every time too. A lot of times when we get calls from customers, they mention about, say, water possibly leaking from the side of the disc, and we have a vent hole designed in the disc so that it relieves the air that's in the disc when it goes to spin and so forth. So if you have too much water in the disc, it doesn't hurt anything. Just wipe it off, place it.
Right. So. No, it's pretty. I've been kind of referred to as somebody like a pool chemist, because I really have latched on to the LSI and usually stuff like that. And this takes it to a whole nother level when it comes to, going out there, you're filling up a disc by the pool and, throwing it in this machine, and the customer, is watching and they're just like blown away. But yeah, it's been really happy to, hear how reliable it is too. Because I'll tell the listeners this: like, I had a pool that it tests phosphates, and a lot of people know that, typically anything over, kind of my rule book is anything over 100 you're wanting to hit with phosphate remover. Well, the tester actually took the reading at 8 parts per billion one time for me, and I was just blown away by that number. I'm like, 8, like not 80, not 800, 8.
Right.
So I was, pretty floored with how well it works. And even the free chlorine is pretty cool, because you'll get like 1.65 for your chlorine reading or whatever it comes up as. And just that accuracy is very important to know and to see and to use, and just have all those factors be that, critical. And obviously with a photometric, system, you're able to do that, because you're right. The human eye is not going to be able to pick that up. So
yeah, it's interesting what you mentioned there, because when I was at the Western Pool Show back in March, I had many service pros stop by that were using a Spintouch right now, and they were mentioning when they go to a new account, they pull out the lab and they show the new customer what they're going to use. The new customer's like, wow, the last guy was using like a little OTO test kit, and they're like, wow, this is much better. And that's kind of the reason why that customer switched to the new service pros, because they had such better service, especially with water testing and other things they offer. So I think the industry has definitely came a long way the last 10 to 20 years now with various things like this.
Yeah, no, it's definitely true. And especially one of the things I was wanting to touch on too is, has this played a big role with LaMotte? I mean, as an industry, we've seen a lot of change with accepting of the LSI being more kind of used throughout the industry. Did that play a huge role in this, as far as LaMotte? I mean, as a whole, having all those factors?
Right. I mean, with any type of testing, LSI is very important. And so like in our software program, we have that designed into it. So when you run your test for your pH, your alk, your hardness, temperature, you can add to it. It gives you the LSI. So yeah, being able to test those tests in our disk are very important. I've been getting requests lately for a 3-way disk that measures pH, alk, and hardness just for LSI testing, or for plaster companies who are building a new pool and they want to make sure the plaster is curing correctly, and after they add water to the pool and so forth.
Sure.
So and all our discs will has those tests in it for our 9-way and 10 ways. Just that we start getting more needs for users, and we offer 3-way discs now that are used by service pros and commercial that measure your basic, like free chlorine, pH, and alkalinity, or free chlorine, total chlorine, pH. And they use those, depending on the regulations of the state, also to help save a few pennies, where they don't need to test everything every time. They may use a free chlorine, pH, and alkalinity disc, but they can use it 3 times. So again, it brings the cost down for testing.
Yeah, that's a good point. I have not used one of those 3-way tests. Is there any kind of advice you have for those? Because it seems like, you could go from like one pool to the next to the next. Is there any advice as far as keeping it, you fill up a third of it and then you use the other ones as you need them? Is there any kind of special trick to making sure nothing happens to it? Or
Yeah, good point. Yeah, I mean, basically with the 3-way disc, we have 3, we'll say, wedges that you fill. So you'll fill the one side at one pool site, you run the test, you get the results. Make sure with the 3-way disc that you keep it flat. So if you go to the next job site, and say by accident you left it in the meter, you don't want any type of water to leak out into the meter and so forth. So most of the users will take that disc out, make sure it stays flat in their vehicle when they go to the next job, and then they'll take it to the site, bring the water sample back to their vehicle, test it, and then grab the chemicals they need. But you can use it 3 times in a 24-hour period. And what a lot of service pros are doing is using that on a regular basis, and then doing the full set of tests, which has cyanuric acid and hardness and metals,
Right.
like once a month or maybe twice a month at a pool. And that just, again, the 3-way disc just also only takes 30 seconds, not a minute, versus a 10-way or 9-way. But it just helps bring down the cost of testing.
Sure. Yeah, it's nice having that much versatility in one disc.
Right.
Speaking of that, one of the questions I had for you, and if any of you out there have a Spintouch or looking to get one, I forget where I heard this, but Rich, maybe you can help me out. Is there any recycling to these discs? Because I've held on to mine and I've been wondering, and now that I've got you on the podcast, can I send those back? I mean,
Yes.
Is there any kind of not rebate, but is there any kind of promotion for us as far as sending them back?
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's funny because, at shows, I do get a lot of disc I go through when I'm demonstrating, and very colorful disc. It'd be nice to make some kind of art collage with them.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I mean, any of the users can send the disc back to us. The only downside is that you have to pay the freight coming back to us for those discs. And then what we do is we have a company that picks up any used disc, and they'll take those to their facility, and they actually chop them up and use it for something else, I guess. But we're not able to reuse those discs over again because they're sonic welded, and they have, of course, the reagents that are in the disc. Nothing hazardous in there. It's just that there's, just can't reuse the disc over again. But if you want to send them back, we just tell customers, place them into a plastic bag so that water doesn't leak out in the box. Ship them back to our LaMotte address in Chestertown, Maryland. And then from there, we actually pay a company to come pick them up, and they recycle them. And so, yeah, right now there's no type of, say, rebate or, we send you free product. We've talked about it. We just haven't moved that direction yet.
Yeah, I forget who it was I was talking to, and they were saying, oh, maybe they just like clean them out and reuse them. I'm like, I don't think it's I don't think it's that simple. You gotta
I really wish there was a way we could, maybe in the future, again, everything's new, so maybe in the future we could design a disc where maybe you could take the top off and reuse the disc again, somehow, cleaning or washing it out. At this point right now, we're using like a medical grade type plastic.
Oh yeah, they're super sophisticated.
Yeah, it's expensive to manufacture too. It's because, if you ever, we have a video, I think, online where it shows kind of like the process, how we manufacture the disc, and it's kind of interesting how.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
So if you ever want to come to our plant, any of our customers, you're more than welcome to come and take a visit and do a walkthrough. Because it is pretty amazing when you see how things are made. And I love watching shows on TV when it comes to products like that, how something's made, so.
Yeah, especially something as complicated as the disc is.
Right.
Have you guys been noticing kind of the play you're getting on social media? I wanted to talk about that a little bit. Getting a lot of, one of the reasons we had you on is obviously for that reason. A lot of people are asking about it. I was in a Leslie store the other day out here, and the guy behind the counter didn't even know what I was talking about. So there's still kind of that ebb and flow of, and they're probably even using your original, store, spin lab in their store, but he didn't know about the Spintouch. So
right.
A lot of guys are asking about it. I know guys in California that are jumping on it. Jason Broswell's group, swimming pool industry workers, they're talking about it a lot. How has that been for LaMotte?
Yeah, well, with social media has been great with the spin, and you're right. It's amazing when you have something on YouTube or Facebook or various avenues there, and people see what it looks like and see how it works, and just amazed of how different it is, and it is very different. For LaMotte, for years, our forte was more the retail area. So if you visit a retailer, especially in the Northeast, Southeast, Midwest, they would have one of our labs in there. And of course, now it's a spin, trying to get customers through the door quickly. But California, in the last year and a half, I've seen a spike in our mobile sales. And at the Western Pool Show, I had a group stop by to buy 15 of them.
Wow.
And, yeah, and they're down in Southern Cal, and these guys saw the huge benefit because one of their friends was using it and told them about it and showed them it, and they're like, "Wow, this is something we need for our business."
Mm-hmm.
And they invested money in them and doing very well with them. So, but yeah, social media, it's definitely helped us with the product.
Yeah, I think a lot of the guys out there, and gals for that matter, one of their big questions is, how am I going to save time? How am I going to save money purchasing something like this? And just so that I can put that out there, I've seen a big impact in time. Not just money, but money is time. And I think that gets a little bit lost in our industry,
right?
Because you could kind of kick off and say, okay, you're spending X amount of dollars in reagents for, like you said, titration test and other meters that are out there that I've purchased. Probably within the last 2 years, I purchased a couple Myron blue pens, and those cost me upwards of $300-400. So, when you add up the money you're spending on some of these testing equipment, and you get this kind of all-in-one, if you will, it's very, very useful. But also the time, because in about a minute and a half or so, the Spintouch is done, and you've done all these different tests. Very, very helpful. One of the things I just thought of as I'm saying this, and Harold Evans did a video with the Spintouch probably about 2 weeks ago up in Washington.
Oh, really? Okay.
And he mentioned, he's a big proponent of this. He mentioned that you want to make sure the water temperature for the testing is, I think it's above 60 degrees. Does that sound right?
Well, I mean, for water testing, ideal temperature for any type of water testing between 65 and 85.
Okay.
And so most people, when they're testing, it's in between there. If you get too cold of water for any type of testing, especially for cyanuric acid, it can actually give you a false result, no matter if you're doing let's say the liquid style disappearing dot technique, or using, say, a spin. If it's below, say, 60, it could possibly cause like a false high result. But if you're between 65 and 85, you should be fine with testing.
Yeah, and then the key to that is obviously if you're plugging in your test results into any kind of system, make sure you put in the temperature of what your actual water is, because then it'll throw off like an LSI result or something like that. So, Rich, we'll probably close this out in a second, but is there anything you want to add as far as LaMotte's focus worldwide or the industry as a whole, like what you see coming down the road? This is kind of one of your little babies here that's really taken off. I mean, it's not even a baby now. I think it's been out for what, 2 or 3 years?
Yeah, it's been out for about 2 years. We launched it in late 2016 over in Australia. And at this point right now, I think of the mobile Spintouch, I think we're up to like 10,000, 12,000 units worldwide.
That's awesome.
Yeah, but I guess overall in the industry, I see it going more to photometric type meters for service pros, of course, retailers, commercial users at water parks and so forth. Just trying to take that guesswork out of water testing, make it easy, be consistent, and all that ties into using some type of software program that can log all the information and have that at your fingertips on your iPhone or on your computer system. So, just like with
that's a big deal
with their app, that's a really good thing to have. And I see more manufacturers offering more type of products like this, and it only makes the industry get better.
Right.
That's what we need to do. Is just keep improving the industry. So, customers are coming to the professionals, the retail stores, or the service professionals to take care of them.
Yeah, it also raises the bar for, Steve, who wasn't able to join us today. We both own our own companies, and, we're out in the field, and there's always that talk of like, what separates you from the other guy?
Right.
gosh, I remember the Better Business Bureau calling me a few different times, and you're always like, oh, what are they calling me about? And then you find out, oh, they want me as a member, and
Right.
they always ask, like, what separates you from the other guy or from the other companies that are out there?
Right.
And my biggest thing has always been water chemistry. So,
Right.
Not like cleaning habits or how I, plumb in a pump or anything like that. It's always come down to, I take water chemistry very seriously, and just happy with this device, and really excited. I actually want to give a nod to Tracy Thornburg. He's the one that kind of helped me set this up. I think we're going to have him on our podcast in a couple weeks, but it was actually really cool. I want to tell people listening that, he got right on the phone. I think he called you up, and Rich LaMotte was right there on the phone with the three of us. And that was really cool. So
yeah, Tracy's a good guy. I've known Tracy for years, and he's always been a top salesperson out there, and technical side too. He's very strong. So he's a great guy.
He actually was the first Spintouch that I got to use, was his that he had got from you guys. So yeah, he actually let me run with it for a week or two in the field, and I was like, I got to give this back to you because I need my own. So it was really fun, and yeah, I just wanted to more or less go over the device and let everybody know that it's kind of that next wave, if you will, of meters, testers, kind of runs the gamut. Like, I don't know what I would do now that I have it. Kind of been spoiled with it, honestly. But let me add actually one more thing to it, because a lot of people say, well, I'm not, and this is something we didn't kind of touch on a little bit, but there's always those people out there that feel like, how do I quantify making that leap to purchasing something like that? And I just want to add this from somebody that uses it in the field on a daily basis, which is, whenever I use it, I'm typically not using it kind of on a daily basis with every single pool. I use it on a daily basis with the pools that I test, like the major components, like cyanuric acid, calcium hardness. Let's see, what are some of the other ones? Phosphates, things that are really slow changing. Obviously, chlorine, pH, and alkalinity, those are very fast changing elements in the water from like a week to week basis. So what I typically try to do is I use it in a fashion where I can extrapolate some of that information. Commercial pools, you're probably using this every single week, maybe every single visit. Residential, who knows how that's going to look for you. But for those that are thinking, this is an expensive device, the test, depending on how much you're paying for the test, it can be something that maybe you're thinking it's going to cost me too much. But I use it in a very fundamental way where I'm not, bringing it with me at every single stop. So just kind of touching on that, not trying to move the product in one kind of view or another, just trying to help guys out there understand that, they can have this as a tool or device that they use probably on like a monthly basis, which is kind of the way I look at it. I don't know. Does that help at all, Rich? Is that something that you promote, or?
Yeah, I mean, again, every user is different. For a retailer, they use it every time a customer comes in for water test. For certain service professionals, they use it, sparingly for new customers or problem pools. For commercial side, they use it every time. But what they're doing is they're doing more of the three-way test, where they're trying to meet the requirements of the state. And then maybe once a week or every other week, they'll do a 10-way test. So that way it takes care of the equipment, or surface issues like staining with metals, or making sure enough cyanuric acid's in the water, or hardness is the correct level. So everybody's different. I was talking to a service professional at the show, Western Pool Show, and what he mentioned is that, he, like I said, he pulls it out when he gets a new customer, and it helps him that way get new business. He also mentioned that what he does is he'll use that three-way disc, and what he's done is he's added another route to his day each day. So he's picked up another job per day. So the time, is a really important part of his business. So he can get to more jobs in one day.
Yeah.
So it all works hand in hand to improve the business and make it right for that user, how they want to use it, and so forth. So
no, that's a good point. Yeah, definitely a lot of different applications out there for sure.
Right.
Well, hey, Rich, I want to say thank you to coming on today and talking with
great.
me. Sorry, Steve couldn't join us. I know we really wanted to be on here to talk to you. So I'll let you go. But anybody out there, LaMotte.com, Waterlink, Spintouch, I think there's also a website there.
Yes, there's a website, of course, to our LaMotte site, which you can still get to the Waterlink information from there. And then we have our WaterlinkSpintouch.com site, which is strictly about the Spintouch and the disc and so forth.
Awesome. Well, hey, thank you, Rich, and thanks to those listening. We appreciate your support. Find us on all your podcast channels, United Pool Association podcasts. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Take care.